House Committee on Capital Investment will come to order. We do not have a quorum yet, so we will wait on that. And I'll wait for a motion to approve the minutes, but
I'm doing good.
let's see. We so Representative Jurgens, since we do have a quorum now, would you move to approve the minutes for February 22nd, George Washington's birthday?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the minutes from February 22nd.
Okay, those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. The chair, that'd be me, would now like to bring House File 1617 before the committee. I guess I'll just make the motion to bring the House File 1617 to the committee and to be re-referred to the committee. Oh, we're laying over now. Oh, this is Torkelson's bill. Okay. My mistake. Wrong bill. So this one, we are laying over for possible inclusion in our bill. Representative Torkelson, would you care to explain your bill?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a great pleasure to be back in the capital investment hearing room, although I went to room 10 looking for you guys and you weren't there. As you may recall, that was our home last year. So,
And I believe, Representative Torkelson, you have an amendment?
I do have an amendment. Mr. Chair, I would like you, if you so choose, to move the A4 amendment.
Thank you, Representative Torkelson. I will move your amendment to House File 1617 labeled A4. Is there any discussion on this amendment? Perhaps Representative Torkelson, you'd like to tell us what it is?
I don't think so.
The amendment is an addition to the bill that merely opens up the availability of these funds for larger bridges should there be leftover money in the fund.
I think it's
Okay, thank you. Are there any other discussion on the amendment? Okay, hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The amendment prevails and is adopted. I would now like to bring House File 13. Oh, we'll back up there. I got it. We'll now go on to House File 1617. I'm just trying to keep people on their toes here today.
It's working, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
You do a good job.
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you. 1617 is a bill that was actually presented last year. It's back again this year. As many of you probably know, there has on occasion been a local bridge fund as part of the bonding bill. There also have been occasions where that local bridge fund has been drained by what I fondly call a budget-busting bridge. There are a fairly small number of local bridges here in the metro area that are very expensive to repair. I understand that they need the work, and it's not my desire that we should somehow cut them off, but just put them on a different path, because when a large bridge like that comes into this fund, it sucks up much of the money that's available. You also may know that there is a priority list of bridges around the state that is kept in very good condition. The list that is kept in good condition and lists off those bridges that are ready to accept funds and works very well when there's money there to actually fund the bridge construction projects that are ready to go. So this is an effort to make sure that that local effort on these smaller bridges can continue every time they have the chance, and the bill merely says that bridges from the fund have to be of $7 million or less. That's the basic explanation, Mr. Chair. I know there's some of my friends here from Minneapolis and St. Paul. I believe they would like to testify to the bill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Would testifiers come forward if they so wish? We have Mr. Don Elwood and Bev Farrer.
Farrer.
Close enough.
Doesn't she determine if that's close enough?
Welcome to the committee, please. Would you introduce yourselves for the record and begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Don Elwood. I'm the Director of Transportation Engineering Design for the City of Minneapolis. My group is in charge of all roads and bridges for Minneapolis. I have a handout, I think, coming around for the 10th Avenue Bridge. The 10th Avenue Southeast Bridge is a historic open spandrel concrete arch bridge that was originally constructed in 1929. Presently, it's on the National Register of Historic Places. This bridge is an important river crossing, as over 10,000 vehicles per day cross the bridge, as well as over 2,000 bicycle and pedestrians each and every day. In addition to serving as a local traffic river crossing, the bridge provides a vital link between two job generators, the University of Minnesota and downtown Minneapolis. It's also an important alternate emergency vehicle route. The bridge becomes more critical as our region grows and more investment comes into the area. Preserving that bridge for future use and future capacity is a priority. The city did a cost-benefit analysis on the bridge, and it was determined that the rehab option is the best solution. Our do-nothing approach would result in total bridge closure and the need to remove the structure. The removal costs alone for that bridge are estimated at $21 million. A new bridge is estimated at $125.5 million. There are very few bridges of this size and magnitude that are on local municipal systems. Typically, they're interstates or state or county type routes. In recent years, there's been several large bridges that have needed repair and replacement, and they're all reaching the end of their service life. Funding for these bridges are very complex. Typically, there's multiple sources of funds. Each of those fund sources have their own timelines and criteria to follow. Flexibility and help is needed at the state level to get bridges like this into a program and fully funded. Clearly, the need for 10th Avenue funding exists. This bridge is unique in municipal size and magnitude. I think I'm consistent with my engineering colleagues across the state, calling for more funding for local bridges and more flexibility. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. I think we'll take Ms.
Farah.
Faraday.
Farah. It's all good.
Farah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I am Beverly Farraher, Operations Manager for the City of St. Paul, Department of Public Works. Thank you for your time. I'm here today to share concerns we have with House File 1617. The City of St. Paul is not in favor of going to a $7 million cap for state bridge bonds. When you combine the cap with the opposition to earmarking transportation projects as detailed in the letter dated August 12, 2016, signed by former Transportation Committee chairs, it leaves bridges of regional and state importance like the Kellogg 3rd Street Bridge without a funding source, essentially making them orphans. First, I want to provide you with a little bit of history with regard to the Kellogg 3rd Street Bridge. In 1982, MnDOT built the Kellogg 3rd Street Bridge because at that time it was designated as Trunk Highway 5. In 1983, the state turned the Kellogg 3rd Street Bridge back to the City of St. Paul. Had the city known at that time that the state bridge bond funding used for the eventual rehab or reconstruction of the bridge would be reduced, the city might not have accepted the bridge as a turnback, given those financial considerations. This bridge spans over 2,000 feet in length and crosses over I-94 and the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad. We knew then, and we know now, that it is an expensive bridge to replace, and state bridge bonds are a significant part of the funding strategy. For those of you not familiar with the Kellogg 3rd Street Bridge, it provides a connection from the east side neighborhoods into downtown St. Paul. It also provides regional access into downtown from westbound I-94. This bridge has proven to be a critical artery for the city, its residents, businesses, and visitors. This bridge carries anywhere from 9,900 to 14,000 vehicles per day. Excuse me. It also serves as a connection from one of St. Paul's concentrated areas of poverty to jobs downtown. In September of 2014, the Kellogg 3rd Street Bridge was found to be structurally deficient to handle the vehicular traffic load. While the city has taken steps to ensure the bridge is safe by reducing capacity, load on the bridge needs to be reconstructed, and we as a local government cannot afford to fund this expense on our own. We need state bridge bonding funds to help fund the bridge replacement. Reconstructing the bridge will allow us to ensure the safety of the city's longest bridge span over a working rail yard and interstate, and create a structure to serve the 21st century needs. We recognize the cost of this bridge is significantly more than other bridges currently in the queue, as Don defined. The high cost of reconstructing this bridge is driven primarily by its length, again, approximately 2,000 feet. We feel if this bill becomes law, we would be unable to fund the rehabilitation and reconstruction of regionally significant bridge crossings. Therefore, we ask the legislature to leave the agency with all available tools and resources to make the most efficient decisions on funding road and bridge projects. Thank you again for your attention and your time, and I'll stand for questions.
No, thank you. Representative Hausman, I want to ask my questions first, and I'll come right to you. Actually, the same question for both of you, Mr. Elwood and Ms. Farraher. And it can be obviously an approximation here. The Kellogg 3rd Street Bridge, the 10th Avenue Bridge, what is the proposed reconstruction cost of each, and how much would you be requesting if there were not a cap? Mr. Elwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the 10th Avenue Bridge, the rehabilitation cost right now in our estimate is $42.5 million. I believe our current request is $32.5, with $10 million of local match, or approximately 25%.
So just, Mr. Elwood, again, from the state bonding, you'd be asking for 32.5?
That's correct.
Okay, and Ms. Farraher?
The Kellogg 3rd Street Bridge looks to be a $62 million reconstruction, and of that, we're looking for, depending on whether we get federal funding or not, between 19 and 22 million in state bridge bonding funds.
Okay, thank you. Representative Hausman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was thinking that we had given the committee this chart to distribute to members, and we may have not communicated that. And so I thought that we got this from MnDOT. I think it's perhaps a misunderstanding to think it's sort of out of control and that big bridges are eating up all the bridge funding, but the vast majority of local bridge projects have in fact been for smaller bridges, and I'll give you, this is just for the bond funds only. The number of bridges that have been done that are less than 500,000 are 304 bridges. Between 500,000 and 1 million are 23 bridges. Between 1 million and 7 million, 14. And the number over 7 million, this is between 2012 and 2015, 1. So really, it is not a problem that's out of control and that big bridges are eating it all up. The dilemma is if there is no other opportunity. You know, the wonderful thing about some of the early county engineers and others who wrote our formulas, and I always cite Bernie Leader as one of those great minds, was that they raised revenues and constitutionally dedicated revenues and then had formulas to make certain that there was a solution for everyone. And in our transportation committee, I was saying that's what I wished we could continue to do here, is to look for a solution for everyone where you don't rule out one particular category rather than sort of arbitrarily do this, especially since as the testifiers mentioned, transportation finance chairs don't like us to earmark these kinds of transportation projects in the bonding bill. So I just thought I would share that for the purpose of helping people understand the vast number of bridges that are built and funded by the state are less than $500,000.
Thank you, Representative Hausman. And I, certainly appreciate those comments. And the fact that I do hope that a solution can be found for this. I'm not exactly sure what the solution is today, other than to say to you that, if we did a local road and bridge project of $200 million, what's the bridge part? Just the bridges? What if we did bridges at 90, and we're looking at $50 million for 2 bridges? You can see that we have the rest of the state to try to serve as well. And if I got $40 million left, if again we did $90 million, and we have $50 million on 2 bridges, it's hard to explain that. So again, I want to look for a solution, a way to do this, but you can see the dilemma that we face with that. Representative Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions for the testifier. So you had said that it was 10,000 cars per day go across the 10th Avenue bridge?
Mr. Elwood.
Mr. Chair, yes, approximately 10,000 vehicles per day on the 10th Avenue Bridge.
Thank you, and Mr. Chair and Mr. Elwood. So during the time in which the 35W bridge was down, what was the count of cars that traveled across the bridge at that time?
Mr. Elwood.
Mr. Chair, Representative Dean, I do not have those numbers with me today. I do know the volume increased dramatically when the 35W bridge was not in place.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And
Representative Dean.
the next question, I guess, would be to the chair or staff. Do we know what the local request is currently for these smaller bridges that would fall under this?
Representative Dean, no, we don't.
Okay, so that then leads me to one other question. We didn't have a bonding bill last year.
Representative Dean?
Yeah.
Apparently, Mr. Lee knows.
Oh, well, fantastic.
Mr. Chair and Representative Dean, the current bridge waiting list for MnDOT's list of local bridges, not including the 2 larger bridges, is, I believe, about 38 million. And that includes bridges that are in the waiting list and those that have plans to move into the waiting list.
Really? I mean, Mr. Chair, that...
Mr. Dean, or Representative Dean.
Yeah, that's okay. So that makes me wonder why we're doing this. Because if the current requests are 38 million and we have $90 million, it would seem that we could fund these 2 $50 million bridges and then all of the other bridges in the local bridges, the budget and the requests. Now, and in saying that, has there been talk of creating a local bridges fund for bridges that might be requesting over $7 million? And I'm
Not that I am aware of.
Okay,
Anyone?
well, maybe that would be to the bill author, if there are any possibilities or if there are any conversations, or if there would be an openness to talk about how we fund these larger cost bridges and not impact the lower cost bridges.
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Dean. You're full of good ideas. Maybe you should run for a higher office.
Okay, let's stop, Mr. Chair, please.
Actually, I think that's a very good idea, and actually, I was going to bring that up. You beat me to it. The local bridge fund really has no official status that I know of. It's just something that has been done in bonding bills on occasion, not with any great regularity, however, because bonding bills are kind of irregular by nature. So I think setting up a large bridge fund as part of a bonding bill would be absolutely appropriate. We know that many bonding initiatives are not actually issued for a period of up to 4 years. And these bridges do take time to assemble a package of funding and to get everything in place for a project like that to move forward. So we don't really know what the timing is exactly going to be on a bridge like this, like these, I should say. So I think a large bridge fund is absolutely an appropriate approach to funding these. You're right, Representative Hausman, they don't come along with any great frequency, but when they do come along, they do make a very large hole in the local bridge fund. And the 90 million we had for local bridge last year was a bit of an anomaly. It's normally been quite a bit less. So there's room to work there, and I would hope that the current chair of the Capital Investment Committee would take all this under advisement and create a situation where we can. The biggest complaint I get from county engineers across the state that are building these small bridges is that they have no predictability in the funding that's coming their way. They can't plan, it's just really hard for them. So I would just add that I've been up close and personal with both of these bridges. As in my duties last biennium, I was able to tour both of them and see the need. The need is obvious, and I would hope that we can get funding packages together to move those projects forward. I understand their importance. I'm not denying that by any means. Just trying to create a situation where everyone can do their work a little more efficiently.
Thank you, Mr.
Representative
Chair.
Dean, you done?
Thank you.
Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is directed to Mr. Elwood. The 10th Avenue Bridge, total cost $42.5 million. The ask is $32.5 million. The $10 million, how does that break out? City, federal, any county money, any reserves? What do you have? And is it in the budget for the city this year?
Mr. Elwood.
Commissioner, thank you. The 10 million is all city funded.
Representative Uglum.
Is that a budgeted item for the city this year?
Remind me if you can't.
Mr. Elwood.
Mr. Chair, I do not believe it is fully, the 10 million is fully allocated in our current budget, but I would make it available through the city funding. And let me explain that a little more. I need to make sure on a bridge like this that I get everything lined up and all timed at the same time. So I'm going to line up my budget, I'm going to line up the design timeline, I'm going to line up the construction timeline to all hit at the perfect time. If I fully lock up that money in this year, that's money I can't use on the rest of my capital program. I need to make sure I can use that. But once I put all the funding sources together, that gets allocated in the city budget and all the money timeline lines up. I think that's a good, responsible way to handle a capital project at the city of Minneapolis.
Okay, I'm good.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wondered if it would be, if we could get information perhaps from House Research, exactly how many pots of money are available for bridges? I mean, I'm getting the impression there's just the one, which is the capital investment bridge account, but maybe there's more there.
Mr. Lee, do you have an answer?
Mr. Chair and Representative Runbeck, the state aid funds available for bridge work, I think would include the constitutionally dedicated county state aid and municipal state aid street funds. Often those aren't sufficient to cover the municipal or county needs on those roads or bridges, but it's essentially just kind of general aid to the local jurisdictions of government to cover road operations, maintenance, and construction. In addition to that, there's the bond-funded projects that we've mentioned in this committee before. And again, those are periodical and not necessarily a sustained funding level.
Okay, thank you. And maybe you
Representative
could
Runbeck.
even, maybe give us a trend. You don't have to do it now, but perhaps a memo. You know, what have we done over the past 8 years, for example? Thank you.
Okay. Representative Jurgens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the testifiers, Mr. Elwood and Ms. Farraher, The 10th Avenue Bridge and the Kellogg Street Bridge, you both indicated are a little unique. In fact, Kellogg Bridge seems like a road. People don't even realize they're driving over a bridge in the downtown area. My question is, how many other bridges within Minneapolis and St. Paul are unique like this, that you can foresee in the next 10 years or 20 years, where you would have a major bridge project that would potentially cost, upwards of $20, $30, $40 million?
I think that's a great idea. Just fund-
Ms. Farrer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, there are not many. Off the top of my head, I know of none, but we would need to get back to you to make sure I'm completely accurate. But this is an extremely unusual, uncommon situation for this particular bridge. So I do not anticipate anything near this size.
Mr. Elwood?
Mr. Chair, I would have to give the exact same answer. I would want to make sure that I could accurately reflect the number of Minneapolis local bridges of this magnitude. I know it's very small, and I know some of the bridges over the Mississippi River through Minneapolis have already had work done on them. So I'd want to make sure I was accurate with a response.
Okay, thank you. Representative Eklund?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I like the idea of exploring possibly a large bridge account with Representative Torkelson. I'd be happy to sit down and talk with you on that. And the reason is, one of my counties in my district put in the half-cent sales tax, and they've got a very aggressive road rebuilding program going on. And the last I talked to the county commissioner, he was two of the county commissioners in St. Louis County, they're real concerned about this large bridge fund taking a lot of that, because they have, I don't remember the number, but it's over 50 bridges that they'll be looking at replacing in the next couple of years. And if you even take half $500,000 per bridge, which some will be more, that's $25 million right there. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Representative Gunther?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember the list came out that Representative Hausman was talking about. There were very few bridges that met that standard, and I kind of remember funding of all the theaters in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and justifiably they should be funded because they are the standout and throughout the whole state is something that we all are very proud of. But each one of those were funded separately through the bonding bill. When they reach a certain standard, they have to be funded through the bonding bill because they can't afford it. State Arts Board can't afford it. So I think any bridge that costs over $7 million should have to go separately through the bonding bill for that particular bridge, just like we do the theaters and various other things. We can't take the very, very expensive things and expect the level amount of funding that we give bridges. I remember when Henry Callis was the chairman of the bonding bill, we had $15 million for bridges for the whole state. And I went and says, Henry, that's not nearly enough, and Blue Earth County alone will suck that up. And then I think this would be a good solution. Any bridge over $7 million should have to seek separate bonding to take care of the repair or replacement of that bridge.
Thank you, Representative Gunther, and Representative Carlson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I am curious. I'm asking this question for a little different reason than just the bridges. But a rule of thumb, what percentage of the construction of a bridge would be materials that go into the bridge? When we're dealing with other construction projects in this committee, we sometimes used kind of a rule of thumb that a given project materials 50% and labor and so on the balance. Would that be accurate for construction projects like this?
Sure.
Mr. Elwood?
Mr. Chair, generally speaking, just generally across engineering projects, whether they be bridge or road or any type of engineering project, roughly speaking, we try to peg about 25% in soft costs. That's a very broad generalities, because as we get into more details, depending on what's involved with the design, sometimes the design's going to be higher, sometimes the analysis takes longer. But just generally speaking, when I'm doing estimates on project, it's about 75-25.
So, Mr. Chairman, you use the term
Representative
soft
Carlson.
cost, so that would be materials when you use the term soft cost, or I just want to make sure I'm understanding the 75-25.
Mr. Elwood.
Mr. Chair, 75% would be bricks and mortar or hard dollar costs.
Okay, then
And
that's
25%
that's
would be
75.
cover
Yeah.
engineering, analysis, reports, field investigation, those types of things. That's just a very broad, generalized statement.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, would that, no,
Representative
that
Carlson.
would be bridges and roads. What about other construction? You have any feel for that new building that's going up somewhere?
Mr.
Would it
Elwood.
be the same kind of ratio in all likelihood?
Mr. Chair, I cannot. My area of specialty is in
Oh, okay.
roads and bridges.
Reason I ask that
Representative Carlson.
question, Mr. Chairman, I happen to serve in the tax committee, and maybe there's some others that do here as well. And we're getting a whole series of bills that came into the tax committee from local units of government to exempt them from the sales tax for local construction projects. And as some of the committee members here know, I got to thinking about that and thinking about state bonding projects, and just introduced a bill, I think it was given a number today, that would exempt state projects as far as the building materials are concerned from the sales tax. Now, when I was looking at the bill, I was kind of assuming 50-50, but I found out that at least with roads and bridges, it might even be better. But when we start talking about then 90 or $100 million and apply a 75% ratio to that as building materials, there could be a significant savings if that proposal moved forward. And for members here, that we haven't always had a sales tax on public entities and those kinds of projects. You know, that went in as one of the budget balancing proposals back in the 1990s. But what got me interested in it was the request by local units of government making those kinds of requests. And I just throw that out there that that could be a savings. And then the other thing that I use when I'm thinking about that is that when we're bonding for these projects, we are bonding to pay a sales tax that the state is in effect collecting. So it's kind of doubling up, in my view. You're, on the one hand, bonding and paying interest over 20 years to pay a sales tax. So I think that's something that we should seriously look at. Now, it's not going to totally resolve the bridge problem here, but when we start talking about a potential bill that, let's use the number $1 billion, and you start exempting the sales tax from that level of projects, you can either do more projects or save dollars in other ways. So just something to think about, Mr. Chairman. And I was taking a targeted opportunity to get from them a feeling for what the sales tax would be on roads and bridges. And I understand when you say the 75%, it's a very rough guess, but that's what I was asking for, was just a very rough rule of thumb kind of answer. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Carlson. Representative Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm not going to speak for Mr. Elwood, but I think when he was saying 75% hard costs, 75% soft costs, that the hard costs actually include some of the labor costs as well, not just purely materials. And I would assume that with road construction, actually the materials might be a teeny bit higher than a 50-50. In a bridge, it might actually be just the opposite, just because of the complexity of doing a bridge. Am I correct?
Mr. Elwood.
Mr. Chair, thank you. You are correct. That's a broad estimation, but that 75%, when we bid a job and we get a bid that comes in, the actual materials, the concrete, the rock, the bituminous, is a small portion of that. There's labor to install it, there's trucking costs, there's traffic control, there's all these other elements that go into a construction project. A road project sometimes will be higher. You have far more traffic control, pedestrian control, all sorts of other costs that go into that dollar figure as you've brought out, where bridges might be a little different. So it is a very generalized estimate and a high level.
And, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Representative Carlson.
I understand that, and being that the bill is introduced, we will be getting a revenue note at some point that will give us a little better information in terms of what the potential savings would be. Each of those projects that I've referenced that have come already before the tax committee, we've had a revenue note for them. So that'll clarify just exactly what we're talking about, and I understand what Representative Dean was pointing out, that there were other elements in the so-called hard costs, but thank you.
And one more
Representative
question or comment, Mr. Chair. I love Representative Gunther's idea of having a large bridge fund and a small bridge fund, local fund. I think it's also important to fund those funds. So to just have a fund and say it's there doesn't really help the large bridges. And I would think it would be advantageous to say that, if we're going to have money in a small bridge fund, then let's make sure that we have target money in a large bridge fund as well.
That's a novel idea. Okay, seeing no more questions or comments from the members, is there anyone else from the audience who wishes to comment on this? All right, seeing none, the chair will lay this bill over for possible inclusion in our omnibus bill. I'd like to Representative Torkelson?
Oh, Mr. Chair, you mentioned a novel idea. I just thought maybe you had another book in mind.
Ooh. Thank you for bringing that up. Let me begin by, no.
The bridges of Ramsey County or something like that.
That's a great idea. Thank you, Representative Torkelson, and thank all of you for the discussion. I think we've actually brought up a couple of ideas that we might be able to move forward on. And now, our next item is House File 1323. Representative Frankie. What? Representative Frankie, would you make a motion to bring House File 1323 before the committee?
Mr. Chair, I'll move House File 1323.
Okay, it will come before the committee, and it will be, I will move.
And it also looks like there's an amendment, Mr. Chair?
Well, first, we have, I will say this, House File 1323 will be re-referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. We have, I'll recognize Representative Vogel to explain the bill, and Representative Vogel, you do have an author's amendment, and Representative Frankie?
I will move the author's amendment for Representative Vogel.
Okay, Representative Frankie moves the author's amendment labeled A1. Is there any discussion on this? Those in favor then of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion prevails, and the amendment is adopted. Representative Vogel, would you explain your bill, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. First, I apologize, being relatively inexperienced, I don't have the wit and the humor of the former chair that was here, so I won't come up with any novel ideas.
Wait a second here. The former chair?
The former chair of this committee, it's kind of like a reunion for me, being here with this group. So the chair of the transportation and the former chair of capital investment, Chair Torkelson.
We're excluding someone here in this somehow.
We are.
But continue.
Well, that was my attempt at humor, folks.
He's a banker. Give him a break.
Yeah, we'll get down to the nerdum stuff now. House File 1323 sets a 3.5% cap for bond payments paid out of the non-dedicated general fund revenue. In doing so, it puts in place a cap beyond the guideline, which is now being used by MMB. Whereas the current guidelines deal with how much in bonds can be outstanding, this cap looks at how much of the general fund will be needed to make payments. An analogy I could use would be to relate this bill to the intent of a mortgage, or the intent of a home buyer with a mortgage. When somebody decides to buy a home, they are typically told how much they qualify for, which then becomes the amount of the outstanding debt they are told they can handle relative to their down payment and other factors. In addition to that, however, the person looking to get a mortgage also needs to know how much of their income they are able to and willing to spend on the payment relative to their future plans and financial well-being, which is the debt service. We as a state are currently doing the qualify for amount by using the MMB guidelines. But in 2009, the how much we can afford of our income, the general fund revenue, was removed so that we no longer look at that guideline. House File 1323 puts that affordability measure back into practice by capping the amount that can be used for all debt payments paid out of the undedicated general fund revenues in any period to no more than 3.5% of forecast general fund revenue for that period. The cap is applied to all obligations for which the payments are made from the general fund and looks to all periods in the revenue forecast. So it does not include the transportation funding mechanism that's used for paying those bonds, because that's a dedicated fund. Prior to 2009, the debt service measurement was used as one of the 3 initial guidelines which had been set in place since 1979. One of them being a debt service guideline and the other 2 dealing with total outstanding debt. When they were originally adopted by the Governor Quay administration in 1979, the debt service guideline was 2.5%. Over the years, there was some adjustments, and by the mid-1980s, the debt service guideline settled at 3%. Over the years, 2 more guidelines were added, another dealing with the total outstanding debt, and one to limit maturities. From that point on, the 3% did not change, but there were varying interpretations which helped to circumvent the 3% in some cases. The most recent example of exceptions was the use of appropriation bonds in 2008, which seems to have been one of the reasons to remove the debt service guideline, because there was conversation as to whether they were long-term legal obligations of the state, part of the definition that was used in the 1979 guidelines. This, as well as other examples, added to subjectivity of the measure, and that debate and caused a debate that had occurred over the years and eventually led to the dropping of that debt service guideline in 2008. Because of this evolution over the years, and often the lack of definition as to what was included in the debt service ratio calculation, the new guidelines dropped the debt service guideline. So starting in 2010, the new guidelines no longer use the payment to revenue guideline because it was decided it was no longer needed to manage the amount of debt being accumulated. It's important to note, by the way, I'm the only testifier, so even though this is a little lengthy, I wanted to give you a good explanation. At least the only testifier that I have. It's important to note, however, that what happened was there was no longer a look-forward measurement, since all the others were static point-in-time measures. Since before the debt service guideline was eliminated, it was the only one that looked forward to the payment needs from the general fund over a period of time. As a result, it removed an important source of information so conclusions could be made about both present and future uses of the revenue available for debt payments relative to other needs the state's non-dedicated revenues are used for, such as HHS, education, transportation, any number of things. Going back to 2008, when the historic guidelines were still fully in place and being utilized, the annual debt service, using all payments from the general fund, was $409,296,000 and represented 2.45% of general fund revenues. In 2016, the latest year I have the information, the payments had increased to $749,431,000, and were 3.59% of revenue. So the increase in the dollars needed for payments from 2008 to 15 has been over $340 million a year, which is a percentage increase of 83%. And it also reflects a significant increase of 49% in the amount of revenue now needed to service. That amount also includes an increase of over $125 million a year in debt outside of the GO debt, things like appropriation bonds, which had payments of slightly less than $18 million in 2008, and now are approaching $145 million a year. So the key here is that not only has it been the increase in GO debt, but it's been a huge increase in appropriation bond debt. And that's why this bill also addresses how much revenue can be used for those to service those type of obligations, in addition to the cap that's being put on. It's an additional underlying cap. It's not another cap. It's an underlying cap saying that this amount can only be used for appropriation bonds out of that revenue stream. So, to more carefully manage the debt, I drafted House File 1323, which states clearly that debt payable from non-dedicated state general fund revenues is what is to be included in the calculation of the debt service, the debt limit ratio, and is not to exceed 3.5%. It also takes a look forward, since it states the ratio needs to be determined for all years of the forecast. The rationale for the cap is to both give the legislature information it needs to provide good financial management dealing with the availability and use of non-dedicated revenues for all areas of state government, as well as setting a cap so both the public and those purchasing the debt see the legislature as managing the debt in a sound manner. The cap does allow for bonding this year if that is the choice of the legislature, and is not intended to be a statement on whether or not bonding is good or not. Rather, it is a way for the legislature to determine how much debt is prudent to allow both now and in the future, so the payments on the debt do not overburden either today's or tomorrow's taxpayers with obligations they find difficult to fund. And I apologize for reading this. I would have rather just spoken it, and I can answer questions. But because of the technical nature, I wanted to be able to lay out the facts that I've gathered over the time that I've studied this so that you get a feel for what I'm talking about. The amendment, Mr. Chair, only adds, relative to the appropriation bonds, on line 2.12, 3 after 2, and if you go back to that statute, it defines what payment or what bonds are paid for out of that part of the statute. So it's just syncing up with the information that you'll see on those spreadsheets, and I believe Mr. Lee can explain the spreadsheets that he put together probably better than me, and maybe with a little less detail.
Well, thank you, Representative Vogel, and I know this is a lot of work putting this together, so we appreciate the discussion we're going to have. Mr. Lee, do you have some enhancements for this?
Mr. Chair and members, if you look at the sheet that you should have in front of you, and I believe is also being handed out, there was a little bit of confusion. That should be a two-sided sheet. On one side, at the top says House File 1323 Debt Management Guideline at 3.5%. And then on the other side, appropriation bond management guideline at 0.625%. I'll start on the 3.25% sheet. The top line shows the non-dedicated general fund revenues. This is based off of the most recent February 2017 forecast. Then the next few lines below that show the debt service payments forecast And I should note on the GO bonds, this assumes an $800 million GO bonding bill in 2017, $230 million in other odd years, and I believe $800 in even years. Then on line 4, it shows the appropriation bond debt service. This excludes cash capital projects, so this is just the debt service for capital projects such as the professional football stadium and agency bonds. And then line 5 shows various lease purchase and certificate of participation projects such as the SWIFT accounting system and the new Senate Legislative Office building. So you can see the total debt service on line 7, the percentage of the general fund non-dedicated revenues, and then what the limit would be at 3.5% on line 11. And then on line 12, you see the variance from that limit. So this is the numbers in bold there would represent the additional debt service that could be paid before reaching that 3.5% limit. And then on sort of the other side of the denominator on line 13, if there was a loss of general fund revenue due to economic conditions or changing in tax policy, that would be the difference on the denominator side. Moving on to the next side of the sheet, the 0.25%, and this applies to a smaller range of debt service. So you can see the same general fund non-dedicated revenues at the top, and then just the appropriation bond debt service, which is more or less flat as opposed to the GO bond debt service, and the lease purchase agreement below that, and then the smaller percentage, and the same there. And you notice that we would be over the limit until fiscal 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Representative Vogel?
That ends what I was going to present. I'm certainly open to questions, and I'm not sure if there's other people that wanted to testify or not. I don't have any testifiers.
Is there anyone in the audience who would wish to testify? Welcome, Ms. Hassemer, to the committee. Would you identify yourself for the record, please, and proceed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jennifer Hassemer, and I'm the Assistant Commissioner of Debt Management at MMB. So thank you for allowing me an opportunity to speak today on House File 1323 and to Representative Vogel for wanting to have a conversation about managing the state's debt. Ensuring that the state is responsible and strategic when it borrows to finance critical projects is important. Rating agencies certainly look at how well we are managing our debt. MMB recognizes the legislature is interested in having some kind of debt affordability measure to further guide its decision-making process. We appreciate that goal and are taking it seriously. Our recommendation would be to approach debt affordability in a manner that does not create unnecessary problems for the state. To that end, I am here to express strong reservations to the bill, and from the outset would offer to continue working with the author to address his concerns. First, having a debt limit put in statute would be problematic for the state. It would be the first time the state has codified a specific debt limit. Debt guidelines were first introduced in 1979 and updated in 2009 to reflect how the rating agencies were evaluating our debt. These guidelines have worked well. In fact, under the current guidelines, we have returned the state to a AAA bond rating. A statutory debt limit would further reduce the state's flexibility to manage its resources and respond to changing economic conditions. Under the proposed legislation, if state revenues fall, whether through an economic downturn or enactment of tax cuts, the state could find itself in violation of state statute without having done anything. Further, if a forecast does show that the proposed limit has been or may be exceeded, since the legislation does not preclude MMB from selling debt that has been authorized prior to that forecast, the state will be primed to violate this new statute. The state sells bonds on a cash flow basis. The cost of any bonding bill is realized over a 3 to 5 year period, as funds are needed by the projects. Put another way, because MMB could continue selling debt previously authorized, The legislation actually permits the state to exceed the 3.5% limit. The bill offers no clear means for coming back into compliance with the statute. We cannot predict how the rating agencies would view the situation. Finally, the current language places 100% of the responsibility for managing within the debt limit on the executive branch. The legislature could, in fact, authorize a bonding bill that exceeded the limit, setting the expectation for funding by state agencies and local governments, and MMB would be precluded from selling bonds to fund the authorized projects. Before concluding my remarks, I will note that MMB received a fiscal note request on this bill, and we had been working towards the original March 13th deadline. We understand that members would now like to receive this sooner, and we will work to diligently complete this. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hassemer. Questions? Representative Hausman.
My first one is to Representative Vogel. What was your source for the history that you laid out for us?
Representative Vogel.
Mr. Chair, Representative, I've gotten various information here. I have to pull out and give you the exact thing. Basically traced back from what I gotten from Nonpartisan House Research, different writings that have been done on debt service. So that's where I came up with the history. I'd have to dig through this to come up with the exact one, but it was actually state documents that I came up with the information from.
And so, Mr. Chair, I would hope that we would not move this out of committee yet today, but that we do our own work. And I know that Ms. Dyson has some very good research briefs on the whole explanation around debt guidelines, and at the very least, I wish I'd brought them today, but that we'd have an opportunity to see them and understand what, how that's been described in the past. The thing that I think is so important to say, because I know we're televised today, is that we are responsible with debt. We are not a state that is out of control. The guidelines that we're living with right now were written by Tom Hansen, who then worked for Governor Pawlenty, and we have been happily living with those guidelines since. They were carefully drafted at the time, and we pay attention to them. We take them seriously. We stay within those guidelines. And the one entity that acknowledges that are the rating agencies. I wish also that we'd have an opportunity to get some of those rating agency reports for this committee to see, because they're always very encouraging around the issue of debt. The rating agencies are aware of the guidelines. They know we take them seriously, that we stay within them, and as a result, and because we now compare ourselves to personal income, they can compare us state to state, and they always say we're mid-range around among the states in terms of debt. We are not in the top 5 or the top 10 or the top 15. I think right now, or at least in 2015, we were 19. So I think it's important to say we're responsible with debt. We have guidelines. That's a good tool that rating agencies use. And I just wanted to underscore the one thing that I heard the testifier say from MMB. One of the reasons that people who understand this give for not writing them into law, as opposed to just having guidelines. If the bottom dropped out of the economy, I mean seriously dropped out of the economy, the state could be out of compliance with the law. We could be breaking the law, not having done one single thing. So that's why the advice always is to make them guidelines instead of being so specific in statute. So I just think because we know we have a backlog, because we are facing the possibility of a bill, I would hate to think that we're sending signals this legislative session that somehow the state of Minnesota is irresponsible with debt.
Thank you. Representative Vogel, do you have any reply to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, this does not preclude selling debt that was already authorized. So that's what the last paragraph in the bill says, is that you can sell the debt that's already been authorized. It does not make it illegal to have the debt that's already outstanding. What the bill says is that there's a 3.5% cap on use of the general fund revenue for all payments that have to come out of the general fund. It's a cap. It's not a target. Therefore, it's no different than what MMB is using right now as far as a number that says should not issue more than this. I agree, though, that it would be in statute rather than a guideline. Right now, the legislature is working in tandem with MMB, which I would hope happens afterwards, because this is not challenging what MMB is doing, and this isn't saying what MMB is doing is wrong. I think what MMB is doing is very good. But you're missing one important component with those MMB guidelines, which is the amount of revenue you need to generate to make the payments on these bonds. And MMB does an excellent job of protecting and has done an excellent job of getting our rating where it is. And I did have some conversations relative to rating agencies, and one important thing to remember with rating agencies is they're rating these securities relative to sales to the public. And the main thing that they want to know is that you're going to get your principal and your interest back. These are all, whether we talk about appropriation bonds as being not general obligations or not, there's a strong enough moral guarantee with those appropriation bonds as well as a guarantee in the marketplace. If we default on an appropriation bond, I'd contend to you that relative to our bond rating and our stature in the marketplace is no different than defaulting on a GO. So I throw all these things together as far as rating, because you're not going to skate on a revenue bond or a appropriation bond or whatever and preserve your rating. What we need to do in the legislature is also protect the taxpayer. The rating agencies are doing a fine job of, and working in tandem with the criteria that MMB has done, of protecting their investors, because they know they're going to get their money, because we have the ability to tax the citizens as much as we need to be able to make those payments. What we also need to do, though, is protect those taxpayers, so that we don't accumulate so much debt that we have to go to them and start overtaxing them relative to the obligations we have. And that's what this is all about. And that's why I think this is so important for the legislature, is we are looking at the taxpayers relative to this ratio and how much they're funding the general revenue stream with their taxes. So both of these things are necessary, just like when you buy a house. But what we're missing is the one important ingredient. So that's really the intent. This is not an attack on MMB. I think they do a great job, and they've done a great job with the rating. This is a legislative matter.
Now, thank you, Representative Vogel. And just to try to crystallize this a little bit, what you're trying to get at, and you can correct me, obviously, if I'm wrong, but you are adding essentially a guideline to the other guidelines, putting a guideline in statute, because you're concerned about the need to address the increase in bond payments. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, exactly. And one of the alerting things to me was the doubling of the payments that we're making. If we had the $350 million a year more now than we had in 2008 on payments, we could solve half of our transportation issue. We could do a lot of different things. We could increase the school age. So that was the thing that got me thinking about this. But you're exactly right, and it's a planning tool as well as really more so than a barrier. If you look on the spreadsheet that Mr. Lee prepared for us, you can see that in line 13, there's quite a bit of leeway. In fact, in some cases, there's more leeway than what MMB is projecting right now using the tests that they're doing. Now, I agree that those numbers will change differently than MMB's, because MMB's are based on the income of Minnesotans. And that's a good measure, because that is your backup. If you look at this again as a house mortgage, the taxing authority of the state of Minnesota, the house value is the value of those taxpayers, the total income of Minnesotans, and that's what they want to see. What this is going to do also then is look at our revenue stream. So using these two things in conjunction, I think will just make us better managers long-term.
Representative Carlson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry I didn't get the testifier's name from MMB, but
Want to identify yourself again, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Jennifer Hasselmer.
Ms. Hasselmer. You indicated that you are working on a fiscal note, or the department is, and that will be forthcoming. I think you said that you had originally geared it for the 13th. The reason I want to clarify that is that, you know, this is a fiscal committee, and having been involved with fiscal committees and fiscal notes and revenue notes for many years, I've always felt that a fiscal committee should not report a bill out without a fiscal note. And I would advocate, it's early in the session. We've got plenty of hearing days yet before us, that we perhaps wait for this fiscal committee to have the fiscal note from MMB. I think that would be just good common sense, quite frankly. And I'm not talking about the merits of the bill one way or another. It's just that that was a discipline that I tried with success, quite frankly, when I chaired Ways and Means and the Finance Committee before that, when I had all the divisions attached to it, that before those bills were reported out, we had to have a fiscal note, or in the case of the revenue note, or tax bill, when it came to the Ways and Means Committee, that we have the revenue note. So I think that's an important point that was made by MMB, that they're working on it, and we should have that before us before we would report the bill out. So that would be what I'm advocating you do. I assume they will have it ready for Ways and Means, but remember then, Ways and Means, if there are decisions to be made, makes the decisions, because that's the last stop before the House floor. And the reason I advocate that we wait here is that if any decisions may need to be made as a result of the fiscal note, that they be made in the appropriate committee, which I'd argue is right here.
Thank you, Representative Carlson. And as you note, the next stop for this bill is Ways and Means.
Yeah, but Mr. Chairman, my point is then that
I understand.
This committee is giving any authority that might need to be taken care of, if there is any, and there may or may not be, because that's the last stop before the House floor, unless you re-refer it back to this committee, but those motions generally don't take place. So if there are further decisions that should be made based on that information, I think they should be made here and not in Ways and Means, is my point. I'm on Ways and Means, and I would have input in Ways and Means to some degree, but I would prefer to have that input here.
Thank you. Representative Jurgens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Vogel, you touched on this. I wonder if you could say a little bit more, though, about the history of the debt service, the general fund debt service that's currently, according to this chart, the debt management guideline at 3.5% shows 749,000 or million. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about the history of that, because you made some comment about if it was 350 million or something like that.
Representative Vogel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative. Yes, one of the things that has occurred here, of course, over the years is that sometimes that it did start as low as 2.4 or 5% way back when it was first used. And from the readings that I did, that was starting to be used up, so they raised it to 3, and then when the 3% started to get there, they said, well, appropriation bonds and things like that don't really count sometimes. So it wasn't in, it was not in statute, it was a guideline, and it was often exceeded until it basically got thrown out in 2008. And what and like I said, the reason that this caught my eye was we are now spending more biennial in debt service than we are borrowing. if you double these, if you look at the numbers that we're going to have in the next fiscal year, or the next fiscal period, we're going to spend more on payments than we are going to borrow. And that's what caught my attention here. So I recognize that putting this in statute is a serious issue. I'm not taking that lightly. But I also think that I'm concerned for our children or grandchildren, because if this continues and we continue to rack up payments like this, we're starving our general fund. So the history has been that it was used, it was kind of massaged, and this would actually say exactly what it is. And it's using all the funds, all the debt service that comes out of the general fund. And it's an easy to calculate ratio, so there shouldn't be any doubt about what it is now.
Representative Hausman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of clarifying questions. I think one is for Mr. Lee. I'm still trying to comprehend this. These charts are based on what the bill would be, the changes the bill would make? That's where these numbers come from?
Mr. Lee?
Mr. Chair and Representative Hausman, that's correct. That and the February 2017 forecast.
And so,
Representative Hausman.
to Representative Vogel, then it would appear that you are writing a bill that we would, in fact, we already know we'd be in violation of until 2020. If I still have to comprehend these numbers a little bit, but I thought that's what I heard when Mr. Lee described these charts, and I thought, why would we want to do that? So we're not going to do any more infrastructure until after 2020?
Representative Vogel?
Mr. Chair and Representative, there's two things going on here. The first is the 3.5% cap on non-dedicated fund revenue for all bond payments that are being made. The other one is the 0.625, 5/8 of 1%. That is the cap on the other bonds that are not general obligation bonds. And you are correct there, that in 2018 and 2019, there isn't any room for any more appropriation bonds. That's been the most popular thing to do. In 2020, it allows $670 million, and in 2021, $210 million. The important thing to remember with these appropriation bonds, and as you see there, it's not an insignificant amount. You know, we're talking nearly $150 million a year now being spent on appropriation bonds that were passed with a 50% majority rather than a 60% supermajority. So this bill is definitely harder on those bonds, because I think it has to be. When we're passing stuff with a simple majority, and it really has the same bearing in the marketplace as a general obligation, which I really do believe it does, I think we need to be more strict with that. So that's where you would not be able to. But if you go to the other side and go down to 2018, you'll see that at 3.5% on line 13, it does give $1,820 million of flexibility there. And that's why I was very explicit in saying this is a cap, not a target. And going out into the other periods, of course, it just grows relative to the revenue stream. So it's not that dissimilar from what you're seeing from MMB right now on the guidelines they have. It's just tracking how much we can afford to pay out of the revenue we have.
And if I could,
Hausman.
and if I could follow up, and these are clarifying out of my history. I mean, the change we made that was dramatic in terms of the guidelines. When Governor Perpich, I even remember hearing the story. They were standing in a hallway in New York and thought, oh, we should have some guidelines, and they sort of on the spot came up with it. And what they said at the time was, we're going to have a percent of the general fund. And we lived with that for a number of years until it was clear from rating agency feedback and others that all states are different in terms of what they include in their general fund, so we really couldn't compare ourselves to other states by having a percent of the general fund. So when Governor Pawlenty rewrote them, he said, we're going to make it a percent of personal income. That is something you can compare from state to state, and so that's been a much better tool for us. I should say a word about the appropriation bonds. The reason they're high right now are three things. I voted, the reason they passed with a simple majority is I think it would have failed if they had brought that in another form. The Vikings Stadium, I voted no. That was the only way they could do that, and then the University of Minnesota had two, and that was the Gopher Stadium and then their research buildings. And I can tell you, the University of Minnesota has now repented of that. They have already, and this was a regent's discussion, have decided they are not going to do appropriation bonds anymore. Appropriation bonds are not backed by the full faith and credit of the state. They require that some budget has to, one of our finance budgets every 2 years has to actually include that in the budget. And there's some risk with that. If the legislature ever failed to do that, then we would be in default. Now, I don't think we would do that because it would ruin our credit rating. But so the University of Minnesota has already said, we're not doing appropriation bonds anymore. And the Viking Stadium was the biggie. I was a no. The only, in my opinion, the only legitimate good use of appropriation bonds, and Representative Torkelson and I have had many conversations about this, he and I agree about this. Neither of us likes appropriation bonds, but there's one good use. And that is when we do, through the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, an appropriation bond allows us to partner with Lutheran Social Service and Catholic Charities and Common Bond and Beacon and Aon, all of whom are trying to solve the issue of people who don't have a safe place to sleep at night. We've made incredible progress with veterans and with families with children. So there is one very good use of it. But I would absolutely agree we ought never to do all of those other things like stadiums again. But that's why it's so high right now, that one decision that the legislature made. I just think there's background on so much of this that I'm just hoping, Mr. Chair, that that we would just lay this over until we're able to put a little more of this into context.
Representative Frankie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Fogel, could you, break it down to me in simpler terms, maybe for people out there watching on TV, because I'm guessing that most people, at least prior to my service, didn't understand or don't understand the difference between appropriation bond, general obligation bonds, debt service, other than equating it to your credit cards or your bank account. So if I'm getting this correctly, we're paying more in what our payments are on our debt than we're borrowing. Is that what you're saying?
Representative Vogel?
Mr. Chair, yes. If you add up on line number 7, the total general fund debt service for 1819, it's going to come to what, $1,435,000,000. We're projecting in an odd numbered year to bond 230 and even numbered years 800. That's $1,230,000,000. So, and this is not new. This has been going on for a few years. So we are now making more in payments than we are borrowing to make current improvements. And that's why this cap was not set to be to stop bonding, because right now, unfortunately, we've got ourselves in a point where we have to bond if we're going to do improvements. But you are, that's the way it is. The other thing, if you look at lines 3, 4, and 5, that's where they're separated out. So you can see that $563 million is for GOs in 2018, 128 for general fund capital projects, which would include the appropriation bonds, and then there's some lease purchase that's done through some state agencies to lease some buildings. So that's where you come up with your total.
One more thing to
Is it
add.
Frankie?
Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative Vogel. I would just like to say that no wonder the credit agencies love us. We're borrowing more than we're paying, and we're paying our bills. So I would love me too. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We have a love fest going on. Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is more or less just a comment. I really appreciate Representative Hausman's background on some of this history, which I think is very important when we're considering this bill here before us, and also Representative Carlson's comments about fiscal notes, because we really need all the tools we can get here to consider this bill, because it's very far-reaching, and I'm certainly not going to speak against Representative Vogel's expertise in his long history of banking and numbers, because I've never run across a guy that's so good at that. But I do believe that we need to take a very, very close look at this. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I'll say, too, certainly, we bond because we have needs. And, that is something that we have to keep considering as we go through this process. Any other discussion? This will be re-referred to the Committee on Ways and Means as amended. Representative Vogel, do you have any final comments?
Well, thank you for a good discussion, Mr. Chair and committee members. I know this is, Chair Torkelson used to tell me stay out of the weeds, and I try my best, but this, you do get there a little bit with this. I guess in closing, I'll just suggest this is really meant to be a good management tool. It gives us good projections of where we're going, and it gives us some information to be fiscally prudent, especially relative to the taxpayer. It works in conjunction with MMB. It does not usurp what they're doing now. And it's our limit as the House of Representatives and hopefully the Senate. And I guess the point of, the credit card issuers aren't always in the best position to tell you when to stop borrowing. The intent of this is that we're going to work in conjunction with MMB and make sure that we do our best to protect both the taxpayers and those bondholders that need to get paid back. So thank you again, Mr. Chair, for the time and the maybe agony of going through all of these number things.
No, thank you, and thank you for going through the work of bringing this to us. Representative Carlson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I raised the question of the fiscal note, but I also, when we were discussing that, pointed out that this isn't a committee that doesn't have time to continue to consider the bill. By bringing it to a vote here today, you put us in a position then of, and I'm trying to formulate an opinion on the bill, quite frankly, but I thought some of the comments about the need for perhaps a little bit more time, my comments in particular about the fiscal note, were important. And, I guess I get another run at it in Ways and Means, but not everybody here does. And so the question that I posed and the request that I guess I'm making is that, as chair, if you would simply lay it over for further discussion, and until it looks like the fiscal note will be available on the 13th. That was the original goal, which isn't too far out there. And, you're in a position where you could just simply lay it over for further discussion. If your decision is to bring it to a vote, then so be it. But then another committee may or may not be the ones that writes the bill.
Well, thank you, Representative Carlson. I have had this discussion, and the chair of Ways and Means wants this bill.
But did he say when he wanted it, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman?
Well, he expects it to be sent from this committee today.
Maybe he likes to write the bill then, Mr. Chairman.
No comment. So, Representative Hausman.
Mr. Chair, the Chair of Ways and Means is a co-author of the bill, I believe.
Yes, he is. So, seeing no further discussion, Those in favor of referring this bill to the Committee on Ways and Means signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
The motion prevails. Keep in tune to see when we meet again. And if seeing no other business before us, as Sergeant Preston said to King, well, King, this case is closed.